My parents asked me to pay $3,200 for my sister's graduation party. I said no. The next day, they called again, this time to ask me to lend her my car. The same car I had spent 3 years saving up to buy. I refused again. A few hours later, when I got off work and returned home, my key no longer worked. I stood outside, my heart frozen, staring at the house I once called family. No message, no explanation, just silence and a new lock. 1 year later, karma came knocking. Before I tell you the rest of this story not just about betrayal, but about the journey to reclaim self-worth, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like a tool? Like you're only loved when you say yes? If so, then this story is for you. And if you're watching from California, New York, Texas, or anywhere else in the world, I want you to know you're not alone. Hit subscribe so we can keep building a community where the forgotten are finally heard. And now, let's go back to where it all began. My name is Lana. I'm 26 years old. And if there's one lesson I learned earlier than anything else, it's this. In some families, love is never distributed equally. Worse, sometimes your very existence is measured by how well you serve those around you. My family wasn't the type with divorced parents or movie-like domestic abuse. On the surface, we looked perfectly normal. A family of 4 with 3 women, me, mom, me, my younger sister Chloe, and my dad, a quiet, stern man who made all the big decisions in the house. From the outside, you might think, what a happy family. They must really love each other. But the reality couldn't be further from that. I was the firstborn, brought into the world when my mother was juggling 2 jobs and my father was just starting a small air conditioning repair business. I entered their chaos, so from a young age, I was taught to cooperate, not ask for too much, and help your parents. In kindergarten, I was already tasked with watching over Chloe while mom cooked. By 1st grade, I was washing dishes, cleaning the house, and ironing clothes for the whole family every Saturday morning. And every time I finished my chores, my mom would say, "Good. That's what a big sister should do. You have to set an example." But setting an example never came with a thank you, let alone a, "we're proud of you." The way they treated Chloe and me was a perfect example of favoritism no one dared to name. When I entered high school and asked my mom for a computer to study graphic design, she said, "Use the schools, we can't afford extra." But 3 years later, when Chloe was just entering 8th grade and asked for her own laptop to make PowerPoint slides, my mom agreed instantly and even bought her a pink case with her name printed on it. When I wanted to go on a class trip before graduation, mom said, "Girls shouldn't travel far." But Chloe got to attend a 3-week summer camp with her friends because she needs the experience. I didn't speak up, I didn't argue. Maybe because I was so used to being the shadow. A shadow isn't allowed to shine. It's only there to support and stay silent. But the most painful part wasn't their silence. It was the way they made me believe that silence was normal. I started working at a fast food place when I was 16, juggling school and work without complaint. When I entered college, I chose graphic design, a major no one in my family truly understood or supported. Design? You plan to draw for a living? What? Survive on air? My mother once scoffed when I applied to the community art college. But I stuck with it. I went to class during the day, served tables at an Italian restaurant near the dorms at night. I paid for my tuition. I rented a tiny studio with cracked walls and a leaking ceiling. And I taught myself how to live with the feeling of being forgotten. For 3 years, I didn't buy new clothes. I didn't go out, I didn't travel. Every dollar I earned was stretched, saved, and tucked away until the day I held the key to my freedom in my hand, a silver, beat-up old Toyota Corolla. The paint was chipped in places, but the engine was solid. No one understood how much I loved that car. It wasn't just a ride, it was a symbol of the freedom I had earned with my own 2 hands. Meanwhile, my sister Chloe was living a completely different life. Everything seemed pre-programmed for her. Straight, a student, cheer squad, a crowd of friends, chauffeured to school every day in a new car, and even had her own allowance. When Chloe graduated from high school, the family threw a small party. When she got into college, my mother called it a dream come true for the whole family. And me? On the day I graduated, no one came. My mom said she had to work. Chloe said it was too far to travel. I took a few pictures by myself, then went back to my apartment and ate instant noodles. But I had gotten used to it. I didn't need to be loved loudly. I just wanted to be respected. And up until that moment, I still believed that if I kept trying, if I just kept being a good person, eventually I'd be seen. I was wrong. And the biggest test was just around the corner request that seemed harmless but would reveal everything my family truly thought of me. That evening, I was invited home for dinner. It had been a while since I'd been back in that familiar kitchen, with the overwhelming scent of fabric softener and the old wooden table that had witnessed countless unspoken arguments. My mom sent a short message. "Come home for dinner this Sunday. Before Chloe's graduation. Everyone will be there." I hesitated, but in the end, I went a part out of politeness, and a small part still clinging to the fragile hope of a normal family. When I arrived, everyone was already seated. My mother gave me a tight, awkward smile, flipping a napkin over and over as if unsure what to do with my presence. My father looked up, then back down at his wineglass. Chloe, on the other hand, beamed like she was about to be crowned a princess. On the table was the lasagna I used to love, but that night, everything tasted like plain water. No one asked how I'd been. No one mentioned my job or any of the things I had accomplished. No compliments. No acknowledgement. Just a quiet dinner, waiting for something I couldn't yet name. Then my father set down his glass and spoke, in the tone he always used when declaring a decision that had already been made. "We've decided to throw a big party for Chloe. She deserves it. And you. You're the most successful in the family. So we figured you'd want to contribute." I raised an eyebrow, still trying to understand. "You mean?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I mean you'll cover the costs," he said bluntly. "About $3,200. It's not that much for you, right?" My mother immediately chimed in, reinforcing the reasonableness of the request. "With your salary now, that amount is nothing. It's not every day we have a college graduation to celebrate." I was stunned. All the sound seemed to drain from the room. I looked around, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was a joke. But no. Chloe was still smiling, as if me opening my wallet for her was the most natural thing in the world. I set my fork down, feeling the blood rush to my face. "I'm not a walking wallet," I said, my voice low and firm. "Since when did working hard become a reason for everyone to use me?" The atmosphere froze instantly. My father frowned. "You're always so difficult. Have you ever done anything without keeping score?" My mother shook her head, disappointment written all over her face. "You only think of yourself. Chloe never asks for anything. And you're always petty, always counting. You can't even contribute to one party." Chloe still said nothing. She just quietly admired her freshly painted nails. I looked at them, three people bound to me by blood, yet standing firmly on the opposite side. "I'm not saying no because of the money," I said, my voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from rage. "I'm saying no because I'm tired of being loved only when I stay quiet, when I give." But no one replied. Just accusatory stares and a suffocating silence dressed up as guilt. I stood up and grabbed my bag. If this is how this family defines love, then I'd rather not be part of it. And I walked away. It wasn't the first time I felt like I didn't belong there. But this time, I began to realize that maybe I had never belonged at all. The next morning, I was getting ready for a virtual meeting when my phone rang. Chloe's name lit up on the screen. I hesitated a few seconds before picking up. Her voice came through soft as sugar, but calculated. "Sis, I've been thinking, if $3,200 feels like too much, then maybe you could let me borrow your car instead? Just for the summer. I need to drive around, meet friends, go to internship interviews. You don't use it much anyway, right?" I stayed silent for a few seconds. My heart pounded, not from anger, but from sorrow. Because I knew that to them, I had never been a person, I was just a means to an end. No, I answered, firmly. That's the one thing in my life I bought with my own money. No one helped me. You can't possibly understand what it means to me. Chloe sighed. Oh my God, you're always so dramatic. I'm just borrowing it, not asking you to give it away. I hung up. No more words. And I didn't expect an apology either. The following day, I came home from work tired, but calm, like every other day. I planned to stop by my parents' house to pick up a few old books I had left in the basement. But when I slipped the key into the lock, it didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. I looked closely. The lock had been changed. A chill ran down my spine. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I texted my mom. Mom, why can't I unlock the door? No reply. I called Chloe. Out of service. I opened my messages, and there it was, a single line from my father, sent at 3 p.m. If you don't consider yourself part of this family, then don't expect to be welcomed like family. I stood frozen outside the house I used to sweep, where I mowed the lawn, fixed broken pipes, and paid the utility bills when my parents were behind. And now I stood there, locked out like a stranger. That night, I returned to my tiny apartment. I turned on the light. Said nothing. Shed no tears. I just sat there, on the wooden chair by the window, staring at the blinking streetlights through worn-out curtains. The silence didn't hurt, not because I was numb, but because it was too familiar. I remembered one night when we were little, and Chloe got sick. My mom held her all night, while I lay in the living room under a thin blanket. The next morning, I gave up my only breakfast so she could eat. She was still weak. I remembered my first Christmas gift from a friend, and how I spent it buying Chloe a new sweater because Mom said she needs it for her class trip. I thought I had lost my family. But that night, I realized something even more brutal. Maybe I had never truly had a family to lose. What I had held on to was an illusion. And them, they had never kept me through love, only through usefulness. The moment I was no longer useful, I ceased to exist in their world. But what they didn't know was that their cold dismissal opened up an entirely new path for me, a path where I no longer had to contort myself to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. After that night standing before the locked door, I never went back. Not because I was angry, but because I had awakened. I deleted my father's number, blocked messages from my mother, and stayed silent on every social platform connected to Chloe. I disappeared quietly, without a speech. I simply vanished from a world that had never truly wanted me in it. And then, I started over. Quietly, steadily, relentlessly. I reached out to old clients and picked up extra freelance gigs designing logos, building app interfaces, creating internal newsletters for small companies. By day, I worked at an agency. By night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, brewed coffee, turned on lo-fi music, and let my hands speak in place of my voice. No praise. No applause. But the money began to come. Then one day, my boss called me into a meeting room and placed a letter in front of me: official promotion. I had become the youngest design lead in the company. I didn't tell anyone. I just smiled softly, went home, bought myself an egg sandwich, and sat by the window to celebrate in the simplest way I knew how. And then I did something my mother had once strictly forbidden. I started painting again. I bought the cheapest watercolor set, recycled paper, and each night, I let myself drift into the strokes. Not to sell, not to prove anything. Just to fill the hollow spaces in my chest, the ones I used to patch up by trying to please others. One day, I came across a local tech women's network in the city. I signed up. At the first meeting, I sat quietly in a corner, listening to other women share their journeys in tech, how they were underestimated, used, and how they rose from those wounds. I didn't speak that day, but when I got home, I opened my laptop and typed my first sentence. Have you ever been seen as useful instead of lovable? That became the title of my first blog post. It was shared hundreds of times within a week. That entire year, I didn't receive a single message from my family, Not one phone call. No apology. Not even a simple, "Are you okay?" I used to think silence was the worst thing. But it wasn't. It was the truth laid bare. When I stopped serving, they stopped caring. I remembered the hundreds of times in the past they reached out to me only when they needed something. When my mom needed a ride to the hospital because dad was in a meeting. When Chloe missed her bus and I had to leave work to pick her up. When my father needed money to cover the electricity bill because he forgot the due date. I was always there, always rushing, always figuring things out. And in return, all I got was a conditional compliment. "You're useful, though a bit stubborn." Now, no one asks for anything. No one calls, no one checks if I'm still alive. I thought, maybe I was never that important after all. But then, somewhere in that long silence, I understood something. It's not that I wasn't important, it's that I had been important to the wrong people. I had placed my worth in the hands of those who never knew how to hold it. And that year, the year I disappeared from my family's map, was the year I finally appeared in my own life. One Saturday afternoon, as I was about to get in the car for my weekend art class, my phone vibrated. On the screen appeared a name I hadn't expected to see: my cousin, Teresa. She was the daughter of a distant aunt, someone I hadn't seen in years, though she had quietly followed my life through social media. I answered, thinking it must be something about our relatives on my mother's side. But it wasn't. "Have you heard?" Her voice dropped after a few polite greetings. "Things at home are falling apart." I furrowed my brows slightly. Teresa began to talk quickly, as if she had been holding this in for too long, waiting for a chance to finally let it out. Chloe's graduation party had gone way over budget. What started as a modest plan of a few $1,000s ballooned into something excessive. My mother, in a show of pride, rented a ballroom at a luxury hotel, invited nearly 100 guests, hired a live band, and ordered a custom cake from a famous bakery. The result? They took out short-term credit loans, couldn't keep up with payments, and the debt started piling up. I sighed. But Teresa wasn't finished. Chloe's family's so-called golden girl had dropped out of college. She'd been caught plagiarizing a final term paper and was suspended for a year by the academic board. Out of shame, she left her dorm without notice and cut ties with several close friends. Her social media accounts vanished. The Ivy League dream had burst like a soap bubble. And my father? The man who once refused to lend me money when my scholarship didn't cover my final year, he had poured his entire savings into a pizza franchise. Took the word of a business partner without doing any market research. 3 months after launching, one location failed a health inspection and made the local news for using expired ingredients. Customers fled. The chain collapsed within 6 months. Once the proud man who sat in the front row of every church service, my father now couldn't bring himself to leave the neighborhood. My mother, the same woman who once looked down on me for working at a restaurant during college, was now working the cashier counter at a small grocery store at the far end of Main Street. Teresa said when she saw her last, she barely recognized her. She looked worn out, hair grayer than ever. And yet, not once did she mention me. I stayed silent throughout the call. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. All I felt was something strange, cold, and indistinct. Like standing in front of a house that had burned down long ago, staring at the ashes and feeling nothing. 2 days later, I received the first message from them in over a year. From my mother. Just one line. "Lana, your father and I want to talk. Come home for dinner sometime." No question mark. No apology. Nothing about what they had done. Just an empty invitation, as if I'd always been part of the family. As if nothing had ever happened. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply right away. Something stirred inside me, no hatred, but a quiet curiosity. What did they want? Did they think I would just walk back in, smile, and accept everything as if it never happened? I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't them trying to say sorry. This was them needing someone to save them. And I knew then it was time to return. Not to forgive, but to close a door that had never truly been opened to me. I agreed to come to dinner. Not because I'd softened. Not because I missed them or still held hope. I came because I needed to see it for myself, to stand before that old door one last time and close it with my own hands, the door I had once knocked on until my knuckles bled, only to be met with silence. I chose a simple black blazer. No makeup, no earrings. Hair neatly tied back. Not to impress but to remind myself, I wasn't arriving as a daughter. I was walking in as a grown woman, strong enough to face those who once broke me. We met at a mid-range Italian restaurant. Not too fancy, not too modest. I arrived right on time. My mother stood when she saw me, lips forcing a smile. "You look beautiful," she said. I sat down, crossed my legs, and poured myself a glass of water. "I've grown successful too," I replied evenly. No one said anything for a while. Soft music filled the space. The server brought out plates of creamy pasta and toasted bread. I ate slowly, calmly, as if I were in a client meeting. Then my father, after clearing his throat and exchanging a glance with my mother, finally spoke. "The family's having a hard time, Lana. Things didn't turn out the way we thought. Chloe's not doing well. Your mom's job barely covers the basics. And me. I made some mistakes." I took a sip of wine, eyes never leaving his. "So," he continued, "we're hoping for a small loan. Around $20,000, just until things stabilize. I'll pay it back. Of course. And others." I set the glass down gently, as if I were placing an old memory back where it belonged. "Back then," I said, "when you asked me to pay $3,200 for Chloe's graduation party and I said no, you changed the locks without a word. I haven't forgotten that." The air turned still. My mother stared down at her plate, her hands clenched around a napkin. My father sat in silence, his jaw tightening slightly. I looked at them, unblinking. "You didn't need a daughter, you needed a walking credit card. A resource. A wallet. And the moment I stopped being useful, I stopped being family." My mother looked like she was about to cry. "We were under a lot of stress back then. We all said things we shouldn't have." My father slammed his hand on the table, not loudly, but with fury. "You ungrateful brat. We raised you all those years, and now when we need help, you turn your back. What kind of person lives like that?" I stood up and calmly slipped my blazer over my shoulders. "You didn't raise me," I said, without needing to raise my voice. "I raised myself. I worked, paid my tuition, covered my rent. I took Mom to the hospital, changed the oil in Dad's car, bought Grandma's medicine, and I never once asked for anything except a little love." My mother reached out, trying to grab my arm. "Lana, don't do this. We're still family." I stepped back half a step. "I used to beg for love. Not anymore. I'm leaving." I walked out of that restaurant into the cool evening breeze, leaving behind a plate of untouched pasta, stunned faces, and a past that no longer had the right to hold me. I didn't look back. Not out of pride, but because I had finally learned how to walk away without asking permission. After that dinner, I never received another message. No calls, no emails, no check-ins, no apologies. As if they had finally realized that this time, I wasn't the same girl, the one who always stayed quiet, always softened, always came back whenever the family beckoned. Their silence didn't sadden me. It gave me peace. At last, they had learned how to let me go. I heard that Chloe moved in with her boyfriend, someone I'd never heard of. She had cut ties with most of her friends after the plagiarism scandal and seemed to have abandoned any plan to return to school. The glittering photos from her past had vanished from social media. The parties, the get-togethers, the praise all gone. Maybe for the first time in her life, she knew what it felt like to be left behind. As for my parents, after failing to pay off their debts, they were forced to sell the house I had grown up in. That house with its weathered red tiles and longan trees in the backyard sat on the market for 3 months before it was bought by a young family. I heard they moved to a small rural town, living frugally, renting a modest home near a farmer's market where my mother walks every morning to buy cheap vegetables and tries to grow accustomed to a life without prestige, without a daughter to depend on. And as for me, I kept walking the path I had chosen. Not with hatred in my heart, but with freedom in my soul. I finished the manuscript of my first book, a memoir and self-healing guide titled Reborn After a Toxic Family. It was published by an independent press, and within just 3 months, it climbed into the top 10 bestsellers in the self-help category on Amazon. I didn't expect it, but I wasn't surprised either. Because I knew there were millions of people out there carrying invisible wounds, children who had been pushed to the margins simply for learning how to say no. I used part of my royalties to buy a new car, this time, an electric vehicle in pearl white. It wasn't just a symbol of success. It represented cleanliness, rebirth, and the conscious filtering of the energy around me. Sitting behind the wheel, hands resting on the brand new steering wheel, I took a deep breath and smiled. I was no longer the girl clinging to an old Corolla as a symbol of freedom. Now, freedom was something I carried with me naturally, every day. And in the end, I created a small scholarship fund for young girls who had grown up in unsafe, unloving homes. Girls who had been called difficult, ungrateful, simply because they dared to dream of a different life. The fund wasn't huge, but it was enough. Enough to keep someone from having to choose between tuition and food. Enough to plant a different seed, a healthy circle that began with the very pain that once shattered me. I don't need applause. I don't need recognition from those who once turned their backs. I just need to know that today, I am living truthfully as myself. And that is the greatest victory I have ever known. I never needed them to fall in order to feel lighter. I didn't crave their collapse as a form of revenge. But when they chose to cast me out just because I dared to say no, I understood something with painful clarity. They never truly loved me. They only loved me when I was useful. They only remembered me when I could give. And when I no longer met their expectations, they discarded me like an outdated object. Some people only come to you when they need something. They'll call you family when you say yes and label you ungrateful the moment you dare set boundaries. But you know what? When you stop serving them, they'll walk away. And that is a gift. Because sometimes, the best thing you can do is not to cling to toxic ties, but to let go and walk away, even if alone, toward the life you truly deserve. And now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been cast aside just because you dared to say no? Have you had to learn to love yourself after your own family turned their back on you? If you have, you're not alone. Leave a comment below and share your story. Somewhere, someone might read it and feel seen. Don't forget to like and share this video with anyone who's trying to heal from family wounds. And if you want to hear more stories about strength, courage, and rebirth from brokenness, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next video. Thank you for listening. And always remember, you deserve a life where love never has to be begged for.